There's a moment that happens to every single person alive. A moment where someone says something cruel, something designed to cut you down, something meant to make you flinch in front of everyone watching. And in that exact moment, you have two paths in front of you. One path is the path almost everyone takes. You get defensive. You raise your voice. You try to explain yourself, justify yourself, prove yourself. And the moment you do that, you've already lost. Not because you were wrong, not because they were right, but because you handed them exactly what they wanted, a reaction. The other path is almost invisible. It's quiet. It's calm. It doesn't look like winning at all in the moment it happens. But give it 30 seconds, and everyone in the room will remember only one thing: that you didn't flinch, that you didn't need to explain, that you simply looked at the person attacking you the way a mountain looks at wind. Unmoved, untouched, unbothered. This is the path the old Stoics walked 2,000 years ago, and it's the same path that quietly separates powerful people from everyone else today. And by the end of this video, you're going to know exactly how to walk it too. Because I'm about to give you 7 responses, 7 exact tools that the ancient philosophers used to shut down insults, manipulation, and disrespect without ever raising their voice. Some of these responses are so simple you'll wonder why you never thought of them before. One of them, in particular, the 5th one, is so devastatingly effective that people who hear it rarely ever try to provoke that person again. So stay with me until the end, because I promise you, the way you handle conflict after this video will never be the same again. Let's start at the root of all of this, because before you learn the responses themselves, you need to understand something the Stoics understood better than almost anyone in human history. Most insults are not actually about you. They are about the person saying them. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor who ruled the most powerful empire on earth, wrote to himself constantly about this exact idea, that when someone insults you, wrongs you, or tries to humiliate you, what you are witnessing is not a judgment of your worth. What you are witnessing is a person revealing their own inner disturbance. Think about that for a second. A person at peace does not attack. A person secure in themselves does not need to tear someone else down. Every insult, every jab, every snide comment is a mirror. And it's reflecting the state of the person who threw it, not the person who caught it. Once you internalize this, something shifts inside you. You stop taking the bait. You stop needing to defend a version of yourself that was never actually threatened in the first place. This is the foundation beneath every single response you're about to learn. Because none of these 7 tools are tricks or clever comebacks in the traditional sense. They are not designed to win an argument the way people usually think of winning, with a sharper insult or a louder voice. They are designed to remove you from the game entirely, so that the other person is left swinging at air, confused, exposed, and often, without even realizing it, embarrassed in front of everyone watching. Here's something most people miss about silence. It is not the absence of a response. It is a response. In fact, it is often the loudest response there is. When Epictetus, a man born into slavery who later became one of the most respected philosophers in Rome, taught his students about handling insults, he told them something remarkable, that if someone tells you something negative about yourself, and it's true, you should thank them for pointing it out, because now you know something to work on. And if it's false, simply understand that it says nothing about you at all, and it deserves nothing from you at all. Notice what's missing from both of those responses. Outrage. There is no anger in either one. There is no need to defend, correct, or retaliate. There's only observation and then release. This is the exact energy behind the responses you're about to learn. Because when you respond to chaos with calm, you create a kind of psychological gravity. People are drawn to composure. They are unsettled by it. When someone is trying desperately to provoke you, and you refuse to be provoked, you don't just deflect their attack. You expose it. Everyone watching sees the contrast instantly. One person is losing control. The other person hasn't moved an inch. And in that gap, in that visible difference, you win something far more valuable than an argument. You win respect. Now, I want you to think about the last time someone said something to you that stung. Maybe it was a coworker undermining you in a meeting. Maybe it was a family member bringing up an old mistake to make a point. Maybe it was a stranger online, hiding behind a screen, trying to get a reaction out of you for sport. In that moment, what did you feel? Most people feel their chest tighten, their face flush, their mind racing for the perfect thing to say back. But what if, instead, you had one single sentence ready, not angry, not defensive, just calm, that instantly reframed the entire situation and left the other person with nothing left to push against? That's not fantasy. That's a skill. And like any skill, it can be learned, practiced, and mastered. The Stoics didn't have naturally thick skin. They built it, deliberately, through daily practice and specific mental tools, the same way someone builds physical strength in a gym. Seneca, one of the most quoted Stoic writers in history, wrote letters to his friend Lucilius describing exact techniques he used to prepare himself in advance for insults and setbacks, so that when they came, and he knew they would come, he wasn't caught off guard. He had already rehearsed his response internally, long before the moment arrived. That's the secret hiding underneath everything we're about to cover. These 7 responses aren't things you invent on the spot in a panic. They're tools you learn now, understand deeply, and carry with you, so that when the moment comes, and it always comes, you already know exactly what to say, and more importantly, exactly how to feel while you say it. So let's get into the first response, the one that Marcus Aurelius himself used almost daily as Emperor of Rome. When facing endless criticism, betrayal, and jealousy from the people closest to him, Marcus Aurelius sat at the very top of the most powerful empire the world had ever known. And yet, if you read his private journal, the one we now call Meditations, which he never intended for anyone else to see, you find a man constantly under attack. Senators plotting behind his back, generals questioning his authority, even members of his own family working against him in whispers he was never meant to hear. And through all of it, his private notes reveal almost nothing that resembles rage. Instead, you find the same phrase repeated to himself, in different forms, over and over again: "This is not my problem to solve, this is theirs." That single shift in thinking is the first response. And it's the one that everything else on this list is built on top of. The response is simply this: when someone insults you or tries to provoke you, you say to yourself, silently, "That's their behavior, not my burden." And then, outwardly, you respond with something as plain and disarming as, "That sounds like something you needed to say." No anger in your voice, no sarcasm, no performance, just a flat, calm acknowledgement that what just happened belongs entirely to the person who did it. Watch what this does in a real conversation. When someone insults you expecting a fight, and instead you calmly hand the insult back to them without raising your voice, you create a strange kind of silence in the room. People don't know what to do with it. The attacker expected resistance, expected defensiveness, expected an opening to escalate, and instead, they got a mirror. And there is nothing more disarming to a person trying to provoke you than realizing, in real time, that their weapon didn't even land. The second response comes from Epictetus, and it's built around a single, brutally simple question that you ask either out loud or in your own mind the instant someone insults you. Why does this matter to me? Not asked in anger, not asked as a challenge. Asked with genuine, almost childlike curiosity. Epictetus taught his students that most of the pain we feel from an insult doesn't come from the words themselves. It comes from the meaning we immediately attach to those words. Someone calls you lazy, and instantly your mind races to every time you've ever doubted your own work ethic. Someone calls you unintelligent, and suddenly you're replaying every failure, every moment you felt behind everyone else. But here's the thing. The insult itself is just noise. It's your mind that turns it into a wound. So when you pause and ask, out loud if you're bold enough, why does that matter to me? You force the other person to justify an attack they never expected to have to explain. Most people throwing insults haven't thought 2 steps ahead. They expect you to react, not to calmly investigate. And when you ask that question with real sincerity, something remarkable happens. The power dynamic flips entirely. Now they're on the defensive, scrambling to explain an attack that suddenly sounds petty and thin the moment it's held up to the light. The third response is one that gets underused constantly, and it might be the simplest one on this entire list: agreement. Not sarcastic agreement, not the kind of fake, mocking, "Oh, you're so right," that people use to escalate a fight. Genuine, calm, unexpected agreement. If someone says, "You always mess things up," instead of defending your entire history and character, you simply say, "You might be right. I've made plenty of mistakes." That's it. No excuses, no spiraling justification. This is one of the oldest tricks in Stoic philosophy. And it works because insults are designed to be resisted. They're built like fish hooks. They only cut deep when you pull against them. The moment you stop pulling, the hook has nothing to grab onto. Agreement removes all resistance. It's disarming precisely because it's the last thing anyone expects. People prepare for a fight when they insult you. They rehearse comebacks in their head. They brace for your anger. When you calmly agree instead, you take away the entire script they were relying on. And now they're standing there, holding an insult that has nowhere to go. The fourth response is a physical one, and it's often overlooked because people assume Stoicism is only about words and thoughts. But Seneca wrote extensively about the power of the pause, the deliberate, visible act of taking a breath before responding to anything that stings. Not a dramatic sigh, not an eye roll, a real, quiet pause where you let a second or two of silence sit in the air before you say anything at all. This single act does 2 things simultaneously. First, it gives your own mind time to settle, so that whatever comes out of your mouth next is chosen rather than reactive. Second, and this is the part people don't expect, it makes the other person deeply uncomfortable. Silence after an insult is unnerving. It suggests that what they said didn't even register as urgent enough to deserve an instant reaction. It suggests calm. It suggests control. And control, in any confrontation, is the single most attractive quality a person can display. You don't need clever words if you have control. Control speaks louder than any comeback ever could. Now here's where it gets interesting, because the next 3 responses on this list go even further than simply neutralizing an insult. They actively turn the moment around, so that instead of walking away from a confrontation feeling smaller, you walk away from it having grown, while the person who tried to attack you is left replaying the moment in their head, wondering what just happened. And the 5th one, specifically, is something the Stoics used not just to defend themselves, but to permanently change the way certain people, treated them going forward. The fifth response is the one I promised you at the very start of this video. The one that, once used correctly, tends to make people think twice before ever trying to provoke that person again. It comes from a concept the Stoics called the view from above, and it was practiced most vividly by Marcus Aurelius, who used to imagine himself rising above whatever conflict he was in, looking down at it the way someone might look down at two children arguing over a toy in a sandbox. The response itself, in practice, sounds almost absurdly calm. Someone insults you, tries to humiliate you in front of others, and instead of matching their energy, you simply say, with a small, genuine smile, "I hope you feel better after that." Read that again, because the power in that sentence is easy to miss on the surface. It's not sarcastic. It's not a jab disguised as concern. It is, if delivered correctly, sincere, because you have already understood, from the very first response we covered, that people only attack from a place of internal disturbance. So when you say, "I hope you feel better after that," you are simultaneously acknowledging their pain, refusing to absorb their attack, and subtly reframing the entire interaction, so that you are now the calm, secure party extending grace to someone who clearly needed to release something. There is almost no comeback to this. Anger has nowhere to go when it's met with concern instead of resistance. And here's the part that makes this response so uniquely powerful. The people who witness it never forget it. In offices, in families, in friend groups, this moment becomes the story people tell later. Not, "Did you see how they fought back?" but, "Did you see how unbothered they were?" That reputation, once earned, becomes a kind of quiet armor. People stop testing you because they've already seen what happens when they try. The sixth response deals with something almost every person struggles with, which is the desperate urge to have the last word. The Stoics, somewhat counterintuitively, considered walking away mid-conflict calmly, without slamming a door or storming off in visible anger, to be one of the most powerful tools available. Not walking away in avoidance, walking away in completion. There's a difference, and it shows in how you do it. You simply say, in a level voice, "I don't think this conversation is going anywhere productive," and then you physically remove yourself, without needing to add one more sentence, one more jab, one more attempt to prove your point. Seneca wrote about restraint constantly, describing anger as a kind of temporary madness, a state where the mind briefly loses the ability to reason clearly, and one of the fastest ways to interrupt that madness, in yourself or in someone attacking you, is to simply stop feeding it oxygen. Arguments, like fires, need continuous fuel to keep burning. The moment one side stops supplying that fuel, the fire has nowhere to go. People often think walking away is a form of losing, of admitting defeat. But watch closely, and you'll notice something different happens in reality. The person left standing there, mid-sentence, without an opponent to keep fighting, often looks smaller in that moment than the person who calmly left. There's no audience left to perform for. No fight left to win. Just the quiet, uncomfortable sound of their own voice, still echoing in an empty room. The seventh and final response is perhaps the deepest one, because it's less about what you say in the moment and more about what you've already built inside yourself before the moment even arrives. The Stoics called this more fatty, a kind of radical acceptance of everything that happens to you, including insults, betrayal, and disrespect, not as things to be feared or avoided, but as material to be used. When someone insults you and you have already accepted, deeply and completely, that discomfort and conflict are simply part of being alive, the insult stops having the power to destabilize you at all. The response, in practice, often sounds like this: That's a fair thing to bring up, and I appreciate you being direct. Not because you agree the insult was true, but because you have made peace with the fact that people will always have opinions about you, and none of those opinions require your permission to exist, nor do they require your emotional investment to survive. This is the response that takes the longest to build, because it's not really a line you memorize. It's a state of mind you cultivate slowly, day by day, the same way Marcus Aurelius wrote his private reflections every single night, not to perform wisdom for anyone else, but to quietly rebuild his own composure before the next day's battles began again. Here's what ties all 7 of these responses together, and it's worth sitting with for a moment before you go. Every single one of them removes something the attacker was counting on. They were counting on your anger, and you gave them calm. They were counting on your defensiveness, and you gave them agreement. They were counting on silence, meaning weakness, and you showed them silence is often the strongest thing in the room. None of these responses are about winning in the way most people define winning. There's no raised voice, no clever insult thrown back, no crowd cheering for a comeback. But if you've ever watched someone handle an insult with total, unshaken composure, you already know the truth. That kind of calm is rare, and it's remembered far longer than any argument ever could be. The people who master this don't walk away feeling like they won a fight. They walk away having never entered one at all, while the person across from them is left standing there, alone, holding an insult that no one ever picked up. There's one more thing the Stoics understood that ties every single one of these 7 responses together, and it's something almost nobody talks about when they teach: how to handle conflict. It's this: the goal was never to become someone who never gets hurt. The goal was to become someone who doesn't need the other person's approval, apology, or defeat in order to feel whole again. This distinction matters more than it sounds like it does, because a lot of people hear Stoic and picture something cold. A person who feels nothing, who's shut down, who's built some kind of emotional wall around themselves so nothing can touch them. That's not what this is. Marcus Aurelius wasn't numb. Seneca wasn't detached. Epictetus, who lived through actual slavery and physical abuse before becoming one of history's most respected teachers, wasn't pretending pain didn't exist. What all 3 of them practiced, instead, was something far more difficult and far more powerful. They let themselves feel the sting of an insult, acknowledge it honestly for half a second, and then, deliberately, chose not to hand their peace of mind over to the person who caused it. That's the real skill hiding underneath all 7 responses you just learned. It was never about having the perfect comeback. It was about refusing to let someone else's words decide how your day, your mood, or your sense of self was going to go. Think about how differently your life would feel if you actually lived this way, even just for 1 week. Someone cuts you off in traffic and gestures at you like it's your fault. And instead of your entire nervous system spiking, you simply notice the moment, let it pass through you, and keep driving. A coworker takes credit for your idea in a meeting, and instead of spiraling into resentment for the rest of the day, you calmly address it later, directly, without the shaking hands and racing heart that usually come with confrontation. A family member brings up an old mistake at dinner, clearly trying to get a reaction, and you simply say, "You might be right. I've thought about that too." And then you keep eating, completely undisturbed. This isn't fantasy. This is available to you right now, today, the very next time someone tries to provoke you. The 7 responses we covered aren't clever tricks to memorize and forget. They're small doors into a completely different way of moving through the world. One where your peace isn't something other people can take from you just by raising their voice or choosing the right insult. But here's something important I want to leave you with, because it's the part most people skip when they talk about Stoicism. And it's the part that actually makes this practical rather than theoretical. None of these responses work if you're faking them. If you say, "I hope you feel better after that," through gritted teeth, dripping with sarcasm, it doesn't disarm anyone. It escalates things, because people can feel insincerity instantly, even when they can't name what they're feeling. The real work isn't memorizing the line. It's doing the quieter work underneath it. The daily practice of reminding yourself, the way Marcus Aurelius did every single night in his private journal, that other people's behavior is information about them, not a verdict on you. That practice doesn't happen in the heat of the moment. It happens in the quiet, boring moments in between. When you're driving, when you're making coffee, when you're lying in bed at night reviewing your day. That's when you build the muscle. That's when the response stops being a script you're performing and starts being something that's actually true about how you see the world. And once that shift happens, you'll notice something strange. You'll need these responses less and less, not because people stop trying to provoke you, but because you'll stop registering their attempts as threats worth responding to at all. If there's one thing I want you to walk away from this video with, it's this: the people throughout history who were hardest to rattle, hardest to insult, hardest to control through anger. They weren't hardest to rattle because they didn't care. They were hardest to rattle because they had already decided, long before the insult ever arrived, exactly what they were and weren't willing to let affect them. That decision is available to you too. It doesn't cost anything. It doesn't require anyone else's permission or cooperation. It just requires you to start practicing. The next time someone tries to get under your skin, one of these 7 responses. Not perfectly, not every time, but consistently enough that it starts to become who you are, instead of something you're trying to remember to do. So here's my question for you, and I actually want you to answer this in the comments below, because I read every single one of them. Which of these 7 responses do you think you're going to use first? Was it the calm agreement, the pause before responding, or that 5th one? I hope you feel better after that, because honestly, that one alone could change how people treat you for years. Drop it in the comments, let me know. And while you're down there, if this video gave you even one tool you're going to actually use this week, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button, because we're building an entire series on ancient philosophy that actually applies to modern life. Not just theory, but real, usable tools like the ones you just learned. And if you want to go even deeper into how the Stoics handled everything from grief to anger to fear itself, there's another video right on your screen right now that I think you're going to want to watch next. I'll see you there. Before you go, I want you to remember just one thing from everything we've covered today. Not the 7 responses themselves, but the idea sitting quietly underneath all of them. Peace was never something the Stoics waited to receive from other people. It was something they built, brick by brick, inside themselves, long before anyone ever tried to take it away. That's the real shift. Not learning the perfect line to say back. Learning that you were never required to say anything back at all. The next time someone raises their voice, throws an insult, or tries to pull you into a fight that was never worth having, pause, breathe, choose. Let them wonder why you didn't flinch. Let them replay the moment later, confused about why their words landed on someone who simply didn't pick them up. That silence, that calm, that quiet, unshakable center, that's not weakness. That's mastery. And it's already inside you, waiting for you to use it. If this video gave you something worth carrying into your next hard conversation, do me one favor before you leave. Hit subscribe and tell me in the comments which response you're taking with you. I read every single one, and if you're ready to go even deeper into how the old philosophers handled fear, grief, and everything else life throws at us, there's another video waiting for you right now. Go watch it. I'll see you there.